For today's podcast, we're going to talk about some adult themes. So if you've got little kids around you in the car or sitting near you, you might want to preview this episode before you watch it in their presence. It's going to be pretty powerful, and I'm excited about this conversation, but I wanted to make sure and give a proper warning that there are some mature themes about this podcast. So let's chat about it. Welcome to Clear Creek Chat. That's Chat with two T's because this podcast is coming to you from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and is a ministry of the Clear Creek Church of Christ. In each episode, we gather together a friend or two and have a chat about issues that touch our lives locally and have implications for the broader kingdom of God. My name is Mitchell Halstead, and today I'm joined by my friend Catrina Cabe. Welcome, Catrina. Now, we're going to jump right into this. Normally, we have a little jokey time, and we might laugh about stuff as we go along, but I want to make sure and give you plenty of time to tell some of the stories that I know are on your heart and on your mind. So the reason we brought Catrina onto the podcast today is because of your work with the S.E.A.R.C.H House. Now, the work you do through Clear Creek includes more than just the S.E.A.R.C.H House, which we'll describe in a minute here. And you're no doubt best known for your work with the Cry for the Broken ministry that you've been a part of for a long time. But the S.E.A.R.C.H House project is so unique and largely, I'm assuming, unfamiliar to most of those that will be listening today. We thought it'd be great to shed some light on the work being done. So let's start off just a couple of quick explanations. In a sentence or two, what is Cry for the Broken ministry, which is probably more familiar to some of our church people, and also what is the S.E.A.R.C.H House ministry?
Thank you for having me on today.
Sure.
Cry for the Broken is a ministry that seeks out people who have been sexually exploited, and we meet their basic needs as well as introducing them to the love of Christ through prayer and through love and through fellowship. The S.E.A.R.C.H House meets basic needs in a broader sense in a safe environment where clients can get comfortable being in that confined environment with Christian people. It can be such a shock to come straight off the streets into a program inside of a home, but the S.E.A.R.C.H House creates a buffer between the two to where they can become more acclimated to Christian living, being surrounded by Christian people, even being in an indoor environment for some of our clients is something that we hope that they can get used to by visiting S.E.A.R.C.H.
Wow. This may be a wrong metaphor, but would it be fair to say that Cry for the Broken is sort of the front line effort of some of this, whereas you're trying to help them move into more of the S.E.A.R.C.H House environment?
It's absolutely a frontline effort. For the past 7 years, we have built a relationship with people who are engaging in sexual exploitation. And it used to be that when I did one-on-one work with these people, it was out of my car because I had nowhere to bring them. And for some to bring them to the church is just too much.
Sure.
So, the car was my office. And now that we have S.E.A.R.C.H, I have a place that I can take these people and they could take a shower. They can wash their clothes. They can sit and have a meal like a real person. And that just means so much when a person has a need to be humanized.
Because dehumanization is part and parcel to the sexual exploitation
100%.
trade.
Dehumanization is a direct result of sexual exploitation.
Can you take a moment actually and flesh out a little bit about what that phrase means, sexual exploitation? Like, what are we talking about here?
Sure. So there are several different forms of sexual exploitation, and the lightest one being survival sex. That's when a person stays with another person, resides with that person in order to have a place to stay, food to eat, or drugs to use, or alcohol to drink. And then the next...
Which you could say, it's just my boyfriend or my girlfriend.
Absolutely, 100%. So a lot of people don't even know that they've engaged in sexual exploitation because relationships today, and really they always have been, it's just more predominantly spoken about today, are so open. I guess.
Sure.
They're open to interpretation. They are whatever you want them to be. And so a lot of people don't know that they've been sexually exploited.
Wow.
The next level of sexual exploitation, in my own personal experience, and other people could share theirs differently, but the next level would be strip clubs. You know, I worked in the strip clubs for 7 years in 5 different states, and that is a form of sexual exploitation. Sure. Where men are paying to see you behave sexually on a stage. The next stage would be engaging in participating in pornography, you know, behind the scenes, not watching pornography, but being in the pornographic films. Yeah. The next stage after that would be prostitution, and that is a commercial sex act where sex is traded for money, drugs, alcohol, or anything really. It could be traded for a cheeseburger. It could be traded for a pack of cigarettes. It could be traded for a case of Mountain Dew. That would all be considered prostitution. And then the most insidious form of sexual exploitation would be trafficking, and that's where force, fraud, or coercion is involved. And you've got a third party making money off of that commercial sex act, and often it's all the money off of that commercial sex act. And we have people who are willing to engage in trafficking, and we have people who are unwilling participants in trafficking, but we see them all as victims because, as I said in the beginning, on the least severe form of sexual exploitation, lots of people don't understand that they're being sexually exploited.
Yeah, it really sounds like it's absolutely a form of slavery.
100%.
Modern day slavery. Yeah.
You know, even in the lowest form of sexual exploitation, it's slavery because we're all slaves to sin. You know, before salvation, we are slaves to sin. But when somebody else begins making money off of your enslavement, that becomes a legal, moral, spiritual issue like no other.
Well, you know, as you were saying these things, it was interesting to me that I don't know, maybe half or so of the stages you just described are illegal, but the other ones are not.
Truth.
They're acceptable, at least by, I don't know, legal society standards, but they're all not what God wants for his creation, for his children.
Absolutely not.
No matter which of those you choose, you know,
Yes.
none of that is what God wants for us. And therefore, there is the need for ministries like Cry for the Broken and the S.E.A.R.C.H House. So let's jump into that for a minute. So we're talking a lot about the S.E.A.R.C.H House ministry specifically today here. So can you help us understand, because I know that the S.E.A.R.C House ministry it's not been around for forever. It's pretty new. And I know you'll explain this in a minute here, but what was the situation like and I know this is not just for women. You were telling me a minute ago, it's for women, it's for men, it's for people that are struggling with gender identity issues. It can be for anyone that's involved in sexual exploitation. So what was the situation like in our local area, maybe before S.E.A.R.C House came into being? What was it like for people struggling with with that life?
Well, as I said before, best case scenario, you know, my car was my office. So they would be in my car as we were trying to figure out what the best resources were for them for the goals that they had personally set for themselves. Another thing that we wanted to put a buffer in between is that many sexually exploited people will engage in survival sex regardless of what medium they're involved in, just to get a shower or some food or a place to sleep for the night. And we wanted to create a safe place where those basic needs could be met without expecting anything back from the client. I had a client who came in yesterday who I was so joyful that she chose to take advantage of all of our services, and she had big tears in her eyes when she looked at me and she said, "You mean you don't want me to do anything for this?" And I was like, "No, girl, no.
That's the
I
point,
love
right?
you. I love you."
It's not a bait and switch.
No, it's not.
Unless the switch is that you leave feeling loved.
Absolutely. That is our greatest hope.
That's your greatest. I love it. Okay, so that situation that it was, there was nothing like this. Not in Hamilton County, and I believe not in Tennessee.
Not in the state of Tennessee.
Wow.
We do have drop-in centers for sexually exploited people in places like Texas, New York, possibly Illinois, with Chicago having such a huge trafficking and prostitution issue. But we are, I can proudly say, the first drop-in center in the state of Tennessee.
Well, that's praiseworthy. It is indeed. Okay, so things have potentially have the opportunity to shift in our local context now, because there is a resource. And I don't know how many people find out about it or how they do. I know you literally drive around and look for folks that you can pop your head out of your car window and say, hey, let's talk or whatever. But where did the idea for this come from? I know you were part of it from the beginning. So walk us through the genesis of the S.E.A.R.C.H House. How did it come into being?
God gave me the vision for S.E.A.R.C.H several years ago. I was thinking back to my own past as somebody who had been engaged in all forms of sexual exploitation and the things that I had to do to survive. And I thought there should be a safe place for women to be able to come and just take a shower and get a meal or have somebody to talk to where the conversation isn't centered around drugs, sex, or money. That, everybody deserves that opportunity. And I wrote it all up and I came up with the name S.E.A.R.C.H, which means Sexual Exploitation Advocacy and Resource Center of Hamilton County. And
it's an acronym.
It is.
That's what all of that stands for. Thank you.
And, I talked to my team about it. We all had an in-depth discussion, talked about what kind of services we could offer, like the basic needs and the referrals to mental health resources, to pregnancy resources, to HIV, Hep C, and STD testing resources. And then it just kind of went dry because we didn't have the funding or the resources. God hadn't released us to make it a reality quite yet. So it went on the back burner. And then my dear friend Tess Brandon, who is the co-founder and executive director of Seventh Well, a ministry that serves trafficked children, came back from a conference that she went to up north. And she said, girl, I got to tell you about these new drop-in centers that are popping up across the country where girls can come in and take a shower and eat food. And I'm like, wait a minute.
This was my idea.
and I'm digging through my emails and I printed it out and I slapped it down and I'm like, you mean this?
Yeah.
And so
that's awesome.
We presented it to Clear Creek, and Clear Creek had lots of questions, which I just respect and honor so much because they had a real interest in this endeavor. And God released it to happen through Clear Creek Church of Christ, as well as many donors that come from the Seventh Well side. And now we're just rocking and rolling and helping people for Jesus, and it's killer.
Yeah. And I know you can't talk about the location specifically, but there is a house, an actual house in a certain area of town that provides all of these different resources for people, right?
It is. There is. And I love it when the clients come in and they look around and they're like, wow. Because it's genuinely a nice place. To be honest with you, it's nicer than my house. And I love that. I love that my babies have a place to go that's even more beautiful than what I have. And what I have is pretty nice.
Yeah. That's awesome. It does show that intentionality has been taken to care for the soul, for the spirit, for the physical needs as well, but helping them emotionally feel like I am valued and I can see it when I walk into this space.
100%.
Someone spent money to make sure that I feel like I have value.
It is. And we had a wonderful partner. Her name is Antea. And she came in and decorated and designed the interior so that it's all trauma informed, very safe and comfortable feeling environment for our clients to walk into.
Wow. That's awesome. So you spoke on this a little bit a minute ago, but I want to make sure that there's a clear picture of how Cry for the Broken, I don't know if syncs with or integrates with the S.E.A.R.C.H House, but Cry for the Broken in some ways is you and some others hunting for people, right, that need to be rescued. And now you've got a place. So how does that work exactly?
Well, outreach is the way that we predominantly get our clients. We get them through referral as well. We've been blessed to work with many different agencies across the years that we've been practicing, and so we do get referrals from other agencies. The other day, Karen Brown and I went out and we handed out information cards to women at the homeless shelter. And I'll tell you, one thing you got to do is be really careful when you're handing out information to women about sexual exploitation, because a woman can quickly become offended. So the approach that I take is, hey, I was homeless for 20 years and I engaged in all kinds of sexual exploitation, prostitution, strip clubs, trafficking, all that. If you know any women who are like me, would you give them this card? And so it
You're
doesn't.
not putting them on the
No.
spot necessarily.
Exactly. That's what we don't want to do is say, hey, you look like you're being sexually exploited. Here's some help.
Yeah.
So I pick up my cross and I carry it with me. And I tell my testimony in some way or another everywhere that I go so that other people don't feel victimized. Because I no longer feel victimized. I'm redeemed. I'm chosen. I'm preferred. I'm a daughter of God.
Absolutely.
And these other girls are too. They just don't know it yet.
They don't know it. Yeah. Man, that I want to pause for a moment because one thing that you and I were talking about before we started recording was there's a lot of amazing work that is done by nonprofits that are not necessarily allowed to put gospel messages at the forefront of what they do. But y'all do get to do that with the S.E.A.R.C.H ministry, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
It's everywhere from the beginning to the end.
Absolutely.
Which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Everybody who volunteers at S.E.A.R.C.H, everybody who's involved with S.E.A.R.C.H is a Christ believer and a Christ follower. The one thing that we don't do is force our clients to come to Jesus, force them to believe in Jesus, require them to love Jesus. We simply show the love of Christ in the things that we do because we believe in attraction rather than promotion.
So whereas you said a minute ago, you're not baiting and switching them, right? You're not saying, all right, we'll give you this, but you got to come to church with me.
No,
that's not happening. We're just going to love you, and we'll see what God does with that.
Right, and we don't do the whole. You can have food, but you've got to listen to this sermon first. You can have food because I love Jesus, and I know that Jesus loves you, and He gives good gifts.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for helping to bring some clarity to that.
Yeah.
So I know you've got stories. I wish you had a chance to tell all of them, which would probably take hours and days perhaps. But give us a story or two of the ways that you are seeing God work through S.E.A.R.C.H House, through Cry for the Broken, bringing hope to people that feel hopeless. Like, how have you witnessed God's resurrection power changing lives?
I want to talk to you about how God works in the long term. In 2011, I spoke at a rehab. I told my story to rehab, and there was a young lady in that audience. There were many people, but this one young lady in particular in that audience. And then several years later, I was at the jail, and I was ministering, and I was sharing my story. And that same lady was in the audience. She was there. And I didn't recognize her from the last time, but she recognized me.
She was there as a prisoner?
Yes, she was.
Okay.
And then several years after that, God told me to go into this particular store. And there was nothing in that store that I would ever buy in a million years. But I'm obedient and I do the things He leads me to do. So I went into this store and I see this lady and God says, minister to her. And so I do. That's why my friends call me the crazy Jesus lady, because I will bust up on you in Walmart and tell you what the Lord has done for me.
Wow.
So I minister to this lady. Years later, Karen and I go into the homeless camp.
It's the same lady? But
yes.
You didn't know at the moment?
I didn't know at the moment.
Okay.
So years later, Karen and I are going through the homeless camp and we're handing out these information cards to different women. And at the end, we come across this one particular woman. And when I hand it to her, she looks me right in the eyes and the Holy Spirit moved over me like a wave.
Wow.
And I thought, there's something about that lady. And the next day, the lady that I felt something for brought the lady who had listened to me at the rehab and at the jail and at the grocery store. And the lady walks in and she says, I know you. Your name is Catrina. I remember you. And that was just God showing me that all these places He takes me to speak and all these different things that He has me to do and all the crazy things that I follow Him in, like going into the store I'd never go into, speaking to the girl that I wouldn't speak to on my own, that He's at work. And I'm really excited to see what plan He has for this young lady. And I know that He does. I'm just, my prayer is that she accepts that plan. And that's the biggest prayer that I would request from our listeners today, is that whatever it takes, whatever these girls need, to be given every opportunity to listen to and to follow God's plan for them, that they do.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that because I want to make sure that we end with request for prayers. Okay. So thank you for mentioning that. And we'll make sure and hit that again right at the very, very end, kind of as our last thing. Thank you for sharing that story. Powerful story of God's faithfulness working throughout the long term, connecting you with people that you didn't even know you were reaching. It's pretty awesome. But as we often say on this podcast, discipleship is not easy. It may be easy to explain it or easy to say what we're supposed to do, but the actual act of it is quite hard. And I know that you have inevitably experienced obstacles and struggles. So in your work with S.E.A.R.C.H House and Cry for the Broken, what obstacles have you and the people you work with struggled to overcome to see these ministries produce fruit?
I think our biggest struggle is keeping the word out there that we are a resource, because it's easy to go out and network and talk with different agencies about this is what we do. But they recognize sexual exploitation so few and far between that we may not occur to them as an option to utilize. So we just need to find ways to constantly keep the word out there that there is help for sexually exploited people, that is what we're here for specifically, and that is our direct calling, is to assist with those who have been sexually exploited.
That's good to know. Are these ministries promoted other than word of mouth? Like, is there a way that someone who is looking might find, someone that's in this situation might find y'all's organization's names somewhere? Like, I don't know where.
You can find information about S.E.A.R.C.H on Seventh Well's website, and you can find information on Cry for the Broken at cryforthebroken.org.
Okay.
We also both have Facebook pages, Instagrams, so we're pretty great with social media. We just need to be in the community more. And with COVID, it's made things really hard. So with God restoring our world and it coming back together as it should, I can't wait to see what plans He has to get the word out there.
Absolutely. And I know just from hearing you tell some of your stories, before we even recorded this, like, so much of this by necessity has to be just boots on the ground conversations with people.
Yeah, man. And that's where I want to be.
Yeah. I mean, who's going to, I don't know, walk into the public library and be like, hey, somebody look up for me, someplace where I can go because I'm being sexually exploited. Like,
Yes.
That's probably not happening.
Yes.
Because all the reasons you mentioned already. But if someone shows up into the world that this person is in and says, hey, I've been there, there is hope for your future, well, people might jump on that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, you have clearly found a way to use your personal life experience as a tool to proclaim the power of God's grace to bring about transformation. But I know a lot of people that might be listening to this podcast or watching this video might think, my conversion story isn't dramatic. The whole, like, I'm not like Paul, who was Saul and was killing Christians. They might think that I was born and raised in this church, maybe this church, and I don't have any interesting story to tell of how God has worked in my life. People think that. I wish they didn't, but we know they do. So the question is, how can I make a spiritual impact on someone whose life experience is greatly different from my own? And that can take a lot of different forms because every one of us has different experience. So whatever our experience is, we can think, how can I impact a person whose experience is different from my own? What do you say to a person that's struggling with that thought in their minds?
I would direct them to the parable of the workers, where some people worked all day in the field, some people worked half a day, and some people worked just at the end of the day, and everybody got paid the same. I used to think that I was closer to God because I had this amazing conversion experience until I had somebody explain that parable to me. And for those of you who have been working in the field your whole lives and get the same payment that I do, I just ask that you allow God to reignite that spirit of service in you. It's my prayer for myself that the Lord keep me low, that the Lord keep me humble, that the Lord just keep me the lowest, because I want to be the highest in His kingdom. I'm in this for eternity. I'm not in this for the now. And regardless of what experience you have, you've got something to offer to someone else that's valuable. With this work, we need people who are good at gardening, people who are good at cooking, people who are good at listening, people who are good at putting puzzles together, people who are good at whatever they're good at, that these regular everyday things are valuable to be shared with people who know nothing but money, drugs, and sex. You have everything to offer someone who only knows money, drugs, sex, and violence. You have everything to offer them. So please don't think that you are less valuable or more valuable, because regardless of how long we've worked in the field, we are all worth the same to the Lord, and He expects the same from all of us. And I would also say, don't be afraid. People are afraid of this work, afraid that they're going to mess up. And I tell volunteers that the most beautiful thing about making a mistake is that it's an opportunity to show a person how you make a mistake and bounce back from it, because they don't know how to do that either. And if you're not willing to get out there and show the best and the worst of yourself, then they're never going to learn. And if you still, after hearing all of that, honestly don't believe that you have anything to offer, then you're the perfect person, because that means that God can do through you whatever He wants to. So bring it, sister.
If you approach it from a place of emptiness and you just say, God, fill me with what is needed, well, He will. Right?
I mean, do you think I'm qualified to be working at Clear Creek or running a ministry? God, no. The only reason I haven't been fired yet is because I allow the Lord to work through me.
Oh, man,
and He makes no mistakes.
I like that. That is something we all need to be reminded of. And as you were saying those things, I was thinking, if you are someone that has really throughout your life known what it is to be loved by parents or by siblings or just by good old people, right? And so you think, I don't know what it's like to not be loved. Well, who cares? You know what it's like to be loved. So can you not use that knowledge of being loved to love someone else? Of course you can. And that is a universal need for everyone, is that need to be loved by somebody. So if you've got that, why don't you use that?
I want people to think about how uncomfortable they would be if they got invited to a homeless camp for dinner. And when they sat down to that dinner, how uncomfortable would they be? Well, these people are going to be just as uncomfortable coming to your house for dinner. So how do we create a more comfortable environment for them at S.E.A.R.C.H when they come to dinner? We practice. We need normal, regular, everyday, run-of-the-mill folks to come and practice.
Cool. Okay, I think that's actually a decent segue into our kind of closing part here. You mentioned a prayer request specifically a minute ago, and you can recap that in a second, but what are some other prayer needs that you would like to go ahead and advocate for and call people to regarding the needs of Cry for the Broken and the needs of the S.E.A.R.C.H House ministry?
I just pray for God's will. I've been taught in my program to only pray for God's will and never to pray for myself unless it is to enable me to serve others. So I want to ask for prayer for that. I also want to ask prayer for all of our volunteers and all of our workers, that they may better serve others, and that we can empty ourselves of self and only do what the Lord wants us to do, to comfort our hearts when we lose the lives of those we serve, because many of them do pass away. We lost 6 clients in 1 year.
Wow.
And that is a heavy, heavy thing. So I pray for resilience. I pray for the ability to handle these things and the ability to persevere in God's work until the end. I also pray that when the end comes on earth for me, that this mission be carried on for someone else.
Awesome. Absolutely. Maybe we'll put that in some show notes. I've never done show notes before, but that seems like a good reason to have show notes, right? Put prayer requests into it. So thank you for sharing those. And I hope that anyone that is listening to this will pray for these things, because they're very, very important. And we'll certainly do that when we're done here. And I also want to know, if a person is hearing this and they're like, God is calling me to serve in this capacity, how could they do that? Like, what's the best way to get connected to Cry for the Broken or S.E.A.R.C.H House or you directly? If someone's saying, I'm being drawn to this, I want to serve people in these situations, how can they do that?
The best way to do that is to follow Willow Bend Farms on Facebook, because they post our quarterly trainings. And we would like for you to go through the level 1 training, and then I will personally put you through a level 2 training in order to serve at S.E.A.R.C.H.
Okay, so there's a process for this.
Absolutely.
You don't just throw someone out there.
No, and if you have more questions about that, you can call me personally at 423-320-5778.
Whatever your number is, right?
Yeah, whatever it is. Call me on it.
Call her on it. She said to do it, so
yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
you're welcome to. Okay, well, that is all the time we've got for today's podcast. Catrina, thank you for coming on today and for shedding some light on this unique and particularly potent and powerful ministries in our community that are channeling the love of Christ towards bringing healing and care to people who just desperately need it. Fact is, though, we all desperately need this, and most of us, I think, often aren't aware of how much we do. It's easy for us to say, they need it. But we got to remember that we need this too. Every one of us out here needs this. But to the rest of you out there, if you are a disciple, you are called to spread the good news of Jesus Christ to your neighbors throughout your city and to the ends of the earth. Grace and peace.